The text came through late, long after dinner was cold. Clara Whitmore was curled up in the corner of a velvet armchair in her Charleston townhouse, half listening to the low hum of a documentary while scrolling through real estate listings on her iPad. It was a habit she'd picked up over the years, tracking Brian's company's new projects out of quiet interest and a sense of duty. But tonight, the notification wasn't a news alert or a bored email. It was a message from his phone. And it changed everything. "Babe, can't wait to show you off at the gala. This time, no need to hide." There was a heart emoji at the end. Clara's thumb froze. Her breath caught. The air around her seemed to shift, like someone had opened a door to cold wind. She stared at the message in disbelief, reading it again and again, as if the words might rearrange into something less cruel. But they didn't. And right underneath was the reply. "I'm so excited. I've already picked my dress. Blush pink? You said you love that color." Her hand trembled as she lowered the screen. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Clara sat still, her body frozen, her mind racing through 8 years of carefully constructed routines, polite smiles at industry events she'd never been invited to, and quiet evenings alone with excuses whispered over late phone calls, too much networking, late meeting. You wouldn't enjoy these types of events. A lie repeated gently still becomes a cage. She had believed him. For years, she'd believed she was being protected. That Brian had simply wanted to keep business and marriage separate. That the world of real estate developers, investors, and fast-talking brokers was too messy, too performative for her more quiet, grounded nature. But it had never been about protection. It had been about shame. She rose from the chair, slowly walking to the tall windows that overlooked the harbor. The city sparkled beneath December's veil. Christmas lights blinked on every porch across the bay, and faint jazz music wafted up from a nearby restaurant's patio. Charleston dressed in beauty and grace. So was she. At least that's how it looked from the outside. The Whitmores were a power couple, at least on paper. Brian was a rising star in high-end development, turning historic buildings into luxury hotels. Clara had once led one of the Southeast's most respected non-profit legal clinics, serving women navigating complex family transitions. But when their daughter left for college, Clara stepped back at Brian's urging. They could finally relax, he said. Focus on their life together. Travel. Entertain. Support his growing business. Only, the invitations never came. Not to the openings, not to the conferences, not to the Christmas parties. And yet here she stood, in a home she had helped design, surrounded by curated elegance, custom drapes, hand-chosen art, and heirloom furniture that whispered stories of Southern grace and stability. And none of it meant a thing anymore. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a photo, a mirror selfie. "Do you think this would be too much for the gala? I want to look perfect next to you." Clara's stomach turned. This woman, this girl, 25 maybe, the same age as their daughter. And from the casual language, the intimacy, the way she assumed she belonged on Brian's arm, Clara knew this wasn't new. This wasn't a one-off mistake or a passing flirtation. This was an affair, and she was the secret. The discarded. The woman too seasoned, too seen, too real to be shown off. Her throat tightened, and she swallowed hard. She pressed the screen down on the kitchen island, backed away slowly, and turned off the light. She didn't cry. Not yet. Instead, she walked upstairs, her bare feet silent against the wood floor, and stepped into her office. It had become more of a storage space lately, but the diplomas were still on the wall. Her law degree from Columbia. the non-profit award she received for advocacy, the framed thank you note from a client who called her the first person who ever really listened. She ran a finger across the mahogany desk Brian had gifted her the year they bought this house. He used to call this her command center, but it had grown dusty, untouched, like a room preserved for someone no longer living there. Clara sat down and stared at the bookshelves, the neatly labeled folders, the brass desk lamp. She pulled open a drawer. Contracts, financial records, notes from city zoning meetings. She had helped build his company quietly, without credit. Not because she needed validation, but because she believed in what they were building. At least, she had. There was a quiet knock on the door frame. Maureen stood there holding a shopping bag and a bottle of wine. "You left the boutique without saying goodbye?" she said, her voice soft but firm. "Something's wrong." Clara gave her a long look. Maureen didn't wait for permission. She stepped in, set down the bag, and poured 2 glasses. "I saw it," Clara said after a long pause. Her voice was low but steady. "The messages. He's bringing her to the Christmas party." Maureen exhaled slow and sharp. "He what?" "She said she already has her dress. He told her he didn't have to hide her anymore." Clara shook her head, eyes unfocused. "I thought I was being protected. Turns out I was just inconvenient." Maureen sat beside her. "Clara, you're not the kind of woman men hide. You're the kind they build their whole damn world around. Apparently not this time." There was a long silence. Clara looked down at her hands. "It's not even about her. It's that I let myself disappear. I let him make me small." Maureen reached over and squeezed her hand. "Then we fix that. Starting now." Clara met her friend's gaze. There was no rage in her eyes, just clarity. Stillness. Something shifting beneath the surface like an undertow. "You're going to go to that party," Maureen said, "and you're going to remind him and everyone else exactly who you are." Clara nodded slowly, not because she agreed just yet, but because for the first time in a long time, she realized she had a choice. And she wasn't going to stay hidden anymore. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1. To let me know, if not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. The morning light spilled softly over the Charleston harbor, brushing Clara's face with a pale golden glow. She sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, staring out at the water. The gentle waves moved with a rhythm that made her feel oddly detached, as if the city itself were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Her mind, however, was far from calm. Last night's revelations had settled in her bones, heavy but awakening something that had been dormant for far too long. Maureen had stayed late, fussing over details of the boutique sale, and quietly encouraging her friend to reclaim what had been lost. She left with a wink and a whispered, "This is your year, Clara. Don't forget it." Clara hadn't smiled yet. Not fully. Not until she had a plan. Not until she understood how to step out from the shadows of a life that had been curated for someone else's convenience. A knock at the door startled her. She wasn't expecting anyone. Brian had left early, talking about board meetings and client lunches, and Sloane was likely still arranging her pastel dress with perfect precision. Clara opened the door to find Victor Reyes standing there, a tall man with easy confidence and sharp eyes that had always seemed to see more than he let on. He held a leather-bound portfolio and a small, polite smile. "Good morning, Clara," he said, his voice warm but measured. "I hope I'm not intruding." Clara stepped aside. Victor, of course. "Come in." Her voice carried a calm that belied the turmoil inside. There was a tension between them, a quiet acknowledgement of the past when she had helped navigate one of his early real estate negotiations and impressed him with her insight and poise. But this wasn't the past anymore. She wasn't the woman who had quietly assisted behind the scenes. She was aware now, and she had leverage. She had purpose. Victor entered, taking in the room with a professional eye, as if scanning for clues about the life she had built, or perhaps the life she had paused. "I wanted to discuss a potential collaboration," he said, settling into one of the leather chairs. "I think there's an opportunity that could benefit both of us, but I'd like your input first." Clara gestured toward the chair opposite her. "Please, let's hear it." She tried to focus on the conversation, but part of her mind kept circling back to last night. The messages. Brian. The gala. The humiliation that had been so carefully hidden. And now here he was, Victor Reyes, offering her a glimpse of something entirely different, respect, recognition, perhaps even an unspoken admiration that Brian had never offered. Victor opened the portfolio, sliding out a few documents with a practiced hand. "Your legal expertise is remarkable," he said. "I've followed your work for years, even after you stepped away from the field. I think we could combine your strategic insight with my company's current expansion plans. You understand risk timing and negotiation. That's rare." Clara leaned back, letting his words settle. There was a thrill in being seen for what she truly was. "I appreciate that," she said slowly. "Most people I work with don't notice that until much later, if at all." Her eyes met his. There was a weight in them, a silent story that he didn't need to hear to understand. She had been hidden, underestimated, overlooked, and now she had a choice about how to step forward. Victor nodded, acknowledging the undercurrent without pressing. "I can tell you're considering more than just the numbers," he said. "I understand the stakes are personal as well as professional, and I respect that. We're not just building a project, we're building a vision, and I think it's time the right people receive the credit they deserve." Clara felt a warmth rise in her chest, a mixture of validation and a tentative excitement that she hadn't allowed herself in years. But even as she considered the potential, she thought of Brian, of the gala of Sloan. She felt a flicker of anger. Yes, but more than that, she felt determination. She would not allow the betrayal to define her. She would craft her own narrative carefully, elegantly, and with every ounce of intelligence she possessed. "Victor," she said, her voice steady, deliberate. "I'm interested, but I need to be fully transparent. There are personal matters I must resolve before I can commit fully to anything professional." She didn't need to say more. He understood. There was a subtle acknowledgement in his eyes that went beyond mere business etiquette. Victor leaned back, slightly still, maintaining his polite composure. "Of course. Take your time. I'm not in a rush. And when you're ready, I think you'll find that the possibilities are, well, limitless." His gaze held hers for a moment longer than necessary, and Clara felt a stir in her chest she hadn't felt in a long time. Not romance, not yet, but the promise of recognition, the thrill of being acknowledged for her own merit. As Victor rose to leave, Clara walked him to the door. "Thank you for coming by," she said. "I'll review these documents and reach out." There was no hesitation in her tone. She meant it. For the first time in years, she felt she had control over her life, over her choices, over her destiny. Outside, the harbor glimmered under the mid-morning sun. Boats swayed gently in the current, their reflections dancing on the water like flickering candles. Clara lingered at the door for a moment, letting the light warm her face. She thought of the gala of Brian and Sloan, of the life that had been paused for him, and she felt something shift inside her. Not anger, not revenge. Focus. Purpose. She returned to the kitchen, set the portfolio on the table, and opened it again. The details of Victor's proposal were intricate, yes, but manageable. They required her expertise, her insight, and more than anything, her courage. Each page was a reminder of what she had given up and what she could reclaim. And as she poured herself another cup of coffee, the first genuine smile in months appeared on her lips. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was Maureen. A simple text. Ready for Plan B. Clara read it twice, savoring the words. Plan B. She hadn't shared anything beyond last night yet, Maureen knew. Somehow she always knew. Clara typed back, Yes, let's begin. The day stretched ahead of her like a blank page, and for the first time she felt the weight of possibility. She had allies. She had knowledge. And she had something far more important than resentment clarity. There would be no rash moves, no public confrontations, no displays of anger. This would be deliberate, precise, and unmistakably hers. She spent the afternoon revisiting old records, reviewing past contracts, and making notes of meetings she had quietly organized for Brian over the years. The realization hit her anew. She had built much of his empire without anyone outside their household realizing it. Every negotiation, every critical zoning approval, every community engagement, she had been there. And now, armed with that knowledge and her legal insight, she was no longer invisible. Late in the afternoon, Clara stepped onto her balcony overlooking the cobblestone streets and festive wreaths lining the historic homes. The smell of pine and the faint hint of ocean air mingled with the distant clatter of tourists exploring Charleston's streets. She closed her eyes, breathing in the moment, letting the sensation of control and awareness settle deep inside her. She wasn't the woman Brian thought he could hide. She wasn't the passive figure Sloane assumed she would always be. She was Clara Whitmore. And she was ready. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows over the harbor, and for the first time in a long time, Clara felt excitement. Not reckless thrill, not naive hope. A quiet, deliberate thrill. A knowledge that she had survived betrayal, hidden disappointment, and years of invisibility, and now she was about to step into a world that would finally see her for the person she truly was. As evening approached, she prepared her notes for the next meeting with Victor, highlighting opportunities that Brian had overlooked and strategies that could elevate her and those who had trusted her judgment. Every bullet point, every analysis was a step closer to reclaiming her life. And somewhere in the back of her mind, a subtle private thought lingered. The Christmas gala was approaching. The night where she would reappear not as a wife kept in shadows, but as a woman in full command of her destiny. That night would be unforgettable, not because of drama, but because of the quiet, undeniable force she was now ready to present to the world. The city streets of Charleston were bathed in the amber glow of late afternoon sun, reflecting off the cobblestones and the brick facades of historic homes. Clara Whitmore stepped lightly along King Street, her heels clicking softly, a rhythmic punctuation to the thoughts tumbling through her mind. The messages from Brian still echoed faintly in her memory, a dissonant reminder of betrayal, but she had pushed past the initial shock. Now her focus was on strategy, on reclaiming her presence, her voice, her dignity. And for the first time in years, there was an electric awareness that she was not alone in navigating this moment. Victor Reyes was somewhere ahead waiting, and with him came a sense of both opportunity and intrigue that her heart could not entirely dismiss. She arrived at a small, understated cafe tucked between an art gallery and a boutique where Victor already sat at a corner table, his expression poised and professional, yet tinged with a warmth that betrayed genuine interest. He stood as she approached, offering his hand. Clara shook it briefly before taking her seat, letting a small, measured smile play across her lips. Victor began gesturing to the portfolio he had brought. I hope I'm not imposing, but I wanted to discuss some ideas in person. I find that some matters are best handled face to face. Clara nodded her eyes, scanning his face, noting the subtleties in his expression, the slight raise of an eyebrow, the controlled energy he exuded. "I'm glad you did. It's been a long time since I've had the chance to think about these things without distraction." Her voice was steady, but beneath it lay a subtle tension, the awareness of the storm that awaited her at the upcoming Christmas gala. Victor leaned back slightly, his gaze drifting over the table, as if weighing each word before he spoke. "I've always admired your approach to challenges. You don't rush. You observe, calculate, and then act with precision. I think that perspective is exactly what we need right now." He opened the portfolio and slid it toward her, revealing meticulously organized documents and charts detailing current real estate developments and strategic growth opportunities. "I want to hear your thoughts on these projections. Your insight could refine our strategy and ensure we're not overlooking anything critical." Clara's fingers traced the edges of the papers, absorbing the weight of their contents. "I see the potential here," she said thoughtfully. "But there are gaps. Certain zoning approvals and community engagement initiatives need closer attention. They've been handled superficially so far, which could create vulnerabilities." Her tone was calm, deliberate, carrying the authority of someone who had built her understanding through years of experience. Each word was measured deliberate, a testament to her regained confidence. Victor's eyes brightened, a subtle acknowledgement of respect flickering across his features. "Exactly. That's why I wanted you here. No one else has the comprehensive perspective you do. And it's not just about the numbers or permits. It's about understanding how people perceive value, how communities react, how influence works in these delicate environments." Clara leaned back, letting the implications sink in. Here was someone who not only saw her capability but valued it openly. Not as a spouse assisting quietly behind the scenes, but as a professional whose expertise could shape outcomes. And yet the unspoken tension lingered, the shadow of Brian, the looming gala, the reminder that her accomplishments had often been overshadowed, invisible to those who mattered most in her personal life. "I need to be upfront," Clara said after a pause, her eyes meeting his. "I have personal matters to resolve before I can fully commit to any professional engagement. The timing is complicated." Victor nodded, his expression softening in understanding. "I anticipated as much. Take the time you need. I'm not in a rush. And when you are ready, I want you to know that the opportunity here isn't just about projects. It's about reclaiming influence that should have always been yours." Clara felt a spark of determination flare within her. Influence. Yes, that's a word I can work with. She allowed herself a faint smile, feeling the weight of past frustrations ease, replaced by a focus on what she could control. The thought of reclaiming her place not through confrontation, but through deliberate action, lent her a sense of power that was intoxicating in its clarity. Victor leaned in, slightly lowering his voice, as if sharing a confidence meant to inspire rather than manipulate. "Clara, I've seen how capable you are. More than most ever realize. You've built structures literal and figurative that others now take for granted. I want to make sure you're recognized and, more importantly, that your voice guides the direction we take." Clara's pulse quickened, not with romantic anticipation, though a subtle awareness of his presence lingered, but with the realization that here was an ally, a professional peer who respected her intellect and her judgment. Her gaze flicked momentarily to the window, to the harbor where sailboats drifted lazily on the tide, each movement a quiet reminder that life continued to move forward, regardless of setbacks or betrayal. She returned her attention to Victor. "Then let's make sure it does," she said softly, conviction threading her words. The conversation deepened, moving from strategic projections to discussions of community impact, long-term growth, and the nuances of navigating Charleston's intertwined social and business networks. Clara's mind raced with possibilities, but her expression remained composed. She was recalibrating, aligning herself with someone who could see her as she wanted to be seen, not hidden, not sidelined. After an hour, Victor closed the portfolio with a soft snap, a gesture of finality and partnership. "I think we have a strong foundation here," he said. "I look forward to seeing where your insight leads us." "And Clara?" He paused, a subtle emphasis in his tone. "I respect the approach you're taking. Thoughtful, measured, deliberate. The world needs more of that." Clara's lips curved in a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes. "Thank you, Victor. I appreciate that. It feels validating to be seen for more than just a role I was assigned in someone else's story." He nodded, rising. "Then let's continue this discussion soon. I'll leave you to your afternoon, but I hope you know that when you're ready, the path forward is wide open." As Victor walked away, Clara remained at the table, her gaze fixed on the street outside, feeling a quiet hum of anticipation. She was no longer the invisible partner standing behind Brian's shadow. She was an active force, ready to step into spaces she had long been denied, to claim recognition and to shape outcomes on her own terms. Returning inside, she opened a folder she had begun compiling the night before, the documents, notes, and reminders of her contributions to Brian's business. Every contract she had reviewed, every negotiation she had influenced, every event she had organized, it was all there, quietly asserting the truth of her impact. For the first time in years, she felt the threads of her life intertwining into a clear, purposeful tapestry. Her phone buzzed with a text from Maureen. "Coffee tomorrow. I have some ideas for the gala." Clara's thumb hovered over the screen. She typed back, simply, "Absolutely. Let's plan." The act was small, but in it lay the first steps toward reclaiming her agency and presence in a life that had been orchestrated for someone else's convenience. The late afternoon sun deepened into a warm golden hue, casting long shadows across the polished floors of her home. Clara closed her laptop, letting herself lean back in the chair, a soft exhale escaping her lips. The tension she had carried, a weight accumulated over years of silent compromise, began to ease, replaced by a steady, deliberate focus. Tomorrow she would continue building, preparing, and positioning herself. The gala would come. And when it did, Clara Whitmore would step forward, not as a hidden figure, not as a supporting role, but as the undeniable presence she had always been beneath the surface. For now she allowed herself a quiet moment of satisfaction. She had allies, she had clarity, and she had a growing awareness that she would not be defined by someone else's perception of her. Every choice she had made, every sacrifice, had led her here to a place of control, recognition, and anticipation. And soon the world would see Clara Whitmore exactly as she was meant to be seen, formidable, poised, and unapologetically herself. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thought mattered to me either way. Clara sat at her desk, a soft glow from the afternoon sun, catching the edges of her carefully organized papers. The Christmas gala was only days away, and the anticipation had a subtle weight in the air, like the pause before a storm, except this storm would not bring destruction. It would bring revelation. She sipped her coffee, letting the warmth spread, slowly centering her thoughts. Her eyes wandered to the portfolio from Victor, neatly stacked beside the legal documents she had compiled over the past week. Each sheet of paper was a reminder of her contributions, her intelligence, and the strategic mind that had quietly supported Brian's real estate empire for years. No one had acknowledged it before, but soon that oversight would be impossible to ignore. Her phone buzzed lightly. A message from Maureen. "Time to finalize your entrance. We need to make them remember your presence." Clara's lips curved into a faint, measured smile. She had been hidden for too long. Tonight, that would change. The evening descended gently, Charleston bathed in the warm lights of street lamps reflecting on cobblestone streets. Clara's townhouse smelled faintly of pine and cinnamon from a small holiday arrangement on the mantel. She moved to her wardrobe, her hands hovering over the silk dresses she had reserved for the gala. The red gown she had selected caught her eye. Deep crimson, elegant, commanding attention without shouting. She ran her fingers over the fabric, feeling the smooth weight the way it would drape perfectly against her frame. This was not about vanity. This was her armor, her signal, the physical manifestation of the person she had become, confident, self-assured, unapologetically herself. Her reflection in the mirror was striking. Clara's eyes, deep and alert, reflected a calm intensity. She had spent years softening herself for others, molding herself into roles that were expected roles that kept her safe, invisible. Not anymore. Tonight she would walk into a room where every glance, every whisper would carry weight, and she would command it. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Maureen entered, carrying a small bag with accessories, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "Ready to stun them?" she asked, setting down the bag and opening it carefully to reveal delicate jewelry. A pair of diamond earrings, subtle yet luminous, a thin bracelet that caught the light just enough to accentuate her movements. These, Maureen said, are the final touch. Not flashy, just impossible to ignore. Clara accepted the pieces, fastening them slowly. "It's not about them noticing me," she murmured. "It's about them realizing they have been wrong about me all along." Her voice was calm, but carried a sharpened edge, the kind that made Maureen nod in silent agreement. "Exactly," Maureen said. "Every detail matters. Every glance you give, every word you choose, they'll feel it. And trust me, Victor is already anticipating it." Victor. The thought of him brought a subtle stir to her chest. Not romance exactly, though a quiet awareness lingered, an acknowledgement of his respect and understanding, the kind that had always been absent from Brian's world. He saw her for her mind, her strategy, her capability. That acknowledgement mattered more than any superficial attention she had been denied for years. The ride to the gala was quiet, the streets reflecting the glow of holiday lights and the soft pulse of Charleston's evening energy. Clara rehearsed her posture, her smile, the way she would navigate the room with calm authority. Maureen, sitting beside her, offered gentle suggestions, subtle eye contact nods, to recognize allies, a posture that spoke of command rather than appeal. Clara absorbed it all, noting the interplay between presence and perception. Every detail counted. The Savoy Hotel loomed ahead, decorated with wreaths and subtle festive lights. Inside the main hall was a blend of classic elegance and soft grandeur, chandeliers, glimmering tables arranged with precision, and the subtle hum of conversations blending with the soft notes of a piano. Guests mingled a mixture of business associates, clients, and social figures, unaware that the evening was about to shift in an imperceptible yet irreversible way. Clara paused at the entrance, taking a steadying breath. She could hear Brian's laughter somewhere in the crowd, the voice of Sloane by his side, light and carefree, oblivious to the presence that would soon unbalance her world. For a moment, Clara allowed herself the smallest private acknowledgement of satisfaction. They believed themselves secure, unchallenged. They had no idea how calculated her return would be. She stepped into the room, each movement measured her dress, catching the soft light, the diamonds at her wrists and ears adding the perfect accent. Heads turned. Subtle whispers traveled through the crowd, curiosity, intrigue, a quiet admiration. Clara kept her expression serene, approachable, but her eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the room with the precision of a strategist observing every variable. Across the hall, Victor noticed immediately. A subtle nod, almost imperceptible, conveyed encouragement and acknowledgement. Clara responded with a small, graceful smile. She did not need to speak. Her presence spoke volumes. Brian's gaze caught hers mid-movement. For a heartbeat, time seemed to stall. He froze, his expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. Sloane turned, following his line of sight, and faltered, a flush rising to her cheeks. Clara allowed herself the faintest of smiles. This was not about humiliation. This was about clarity, recognition, truth. Clara moved gracefully through the crowd, nodding politely, engaging briefly with colleagues and friends she had long supported silently. Each interaction was precise, revealing competence and composure. Every observer, even those unaware of the personal history, could feel the presence of a woman who had been underestimated and now walked into the light, fully realized. She approached Victor, who had moved to a strategic position near the reception, subtly guiding her introduction to key figures. Their conversation flowed effortlessly, a seamless blend of strategy, insight, and quiet rapport. Every word she spoke, every thoughtful pause reinforced her capability. She was not just returning to the room, she was commanding it. Brian, attempting to regain composure, tried to speak to her, but Clara's calm confidence held him at bay. Sloane hovered awkwardly, attempting small talk, but the natural hierarchy of attention had shifted. Clara's subtle command of space and conversation made it clear who held influence. This was her arena now, and she navigated it with effortless authority. The gala continued, each interaction a chess move. Clara's every choice, gesture, smile, word was deliberate. Observers began to notice. Whispers circulated. Who is she? She wasn't invited as a spouse. Her presence alone reshaped the room's energy, turning curiosity into admiration. Brian attempted to interject to assert the position he had assumed was unassailable, but Clara's poised responses, grounded in intelligence and timing, rendered attempts unnecessary. Victor, sensing the moment, subtly guided introductions to influential clients, giving Clara opportunities to display her strategic insight. She offered perspectives that drew nods, subtle acknowledgments, a quiet yet unmistakable recognition. For the first time in years, she was seen not as a hidden partner, not as a background presence, but as the individual she had always been. As the evening progressed, Clara found brief moments to reflect quietly, the journey from invisibility to this controlled presence, the careful preparation, the deliberate observation of each reaction, the subtle sway of attention. The satisfaction was private, profound, not rooted in revenge, but in the reclamation of agency and self-respect. At a moment when the room's energy reached a gentle crescendo, Clara caught Victor's eye. His subtle nod conveyed acknowledgement, admiration, and partnership. In that glance, she recognized not just an ally, but someone who valued her insight and presence as much as she valued her own reclaimed power. The gala stretched on, conversations ebbing and flowing, wine glasses, clinking soft music, providing a melodic undercurrent to the social dance. Clara moved through it with ease, her earlier tension replaced by a quiet, confident pulse of purpose. Every whisper, every gaze, every acknowledgement of her presence reinforced a single truth. She was no longer hidden, no longer underestimated. She was visible, formidable, and entirely in command of her story. Finally, as the evening drew toward its peak, Clara paused by a window overlooking the illuminated harbor. Charleston's waterfront shimmered under the glow of holiday lights, a reflection of the city's elegance mirrored in the water. She took a slow, deliberate breath. This was not just a moment of triumph. It was a promise to herself, to her future, to the life she was determined to reclaim. And the night still unfolding held limitless possibilities. The winter morning in Charleston carried a crispness that made Clara Whitmore pull her scarf tighter as she walked to her townhouse office. The harbor gleamed in the distance, the low sunlight shimmering over the water, casting long shadows over the cobblestone streets below. She felt the quiet weight of the gala night still lingering like a memory that refused to fade. The way heads had turned, the subtle shift in attention, and the faint acknowledgement of her presence replayed in her mind. It was intoxicating, but she reminded herself, this was only the beginning. Maureen had already arrived when Clara opened the door, her bright smile lighting up the room. "Good morning, ready to start planning your next moves?" she asked, setting down a notebook and a cup of steaming tea. Clara nodded, her thoughts aligning. They had work to do, and every detail mattered. The gala had been a glimpse, a taste of what she could command when fully prepared, but it hadn't resolved everything. There were bridges to build, positions to reclaim, and her husband's fragile ego to navigate without letting it undermine her own presence. Maureen leaned forward, eyes glinting with enthusiasm. "Victor is expecting to meet with you about the proposal revisions. He mentioned he has some new ideas for your strategic involvement. I think this is a perfect opportunity to demonstrate your full capacity." Clara smiled faintly. "Victor respects intellect," she said softly, almost to herself. "He notices insight, not appearance." "That's refreshing." She felt a subtle warmth, an acknowledgement she hadn't experienced with Brian in years. There was no pretense, no hidden agenda beyond mutual professional respect. It stirred something inside her, a recognition of value she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. They spent the next hour going through the portfolio together, Clara carefully annotating areas that required more attention and proposing strategic approaches that would ensure the success of the venture. Every suggestion was deliberate, precise, and carefully thought through. Maureen offered input, noting the subtleties of presentation and timing, how to frame each insight to capture the attention and admiration of decision-makers. Clara absorbed each observation, internalizing the lessons while honing her own voice. As they worked, Clara's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and saw a message from Victor. "Can we meet at 3? I'd like to go over the new projections with you before finalizing anything. Your perspective is critical." She hesitated briefly, the echo of last night's encounters with Brian lingering in the back of her mind. The thought of Sloane's presence and the delicate balance of the upcoming gala brought a brief flicker of unease. But it was quickly replaced by determination. She had control now, not through confrontation, but through preparation and intellect. Clara typed back a simple reply, 3 works. "See you then." She set the phone down and turned to Maureen. "It's time," she said softly. "We prepare not just for the gala, but for everything that follows. Every impression counts, every interaction has meaning." The afternoon meeting with Victor was held in a modest, sunlit office overlooking the Charleston harbor. Victor greeted her warmly, his presence calm yet encouraging, as if acknowledging her capabilities without overshadowing them. "Clara," he said, "I reviewed your annotations. Impressive as always. I'd like to explore not just the technical revisions, but your approach to influence how you see community engagement, perception, and strategy beyond the numbers." Clara nodded, adjusting her blazer and straightening her posture. "Influence is subtle," she began, her voice deliberate, measured. "It's about positioning, understanding how decisions ripple through communities, how perception shapes opportunity. Numbers are necessary, but insight is what creates sustainable success." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Victor's expression showed acknowledgement, a recognition that went beyond professional courtesy. It was rare to be heard this fully, and Clara felt the quiet thrill of that acknowledgement. Victor leaned forward slightly. "Exactly. And that's why I'm suggesting a more active role for you in upcoming negotiations. Your understanding of legal frameworks, zoning laws, and stakeholder relationships could be invaluable." His eyes met hers steadily, conveying both respect and a subtle, unspoken trust. Clara considered the proposal carefully. "I will engage, but strategically," she said. "No impulsive moves. Every step must align with long-term objectives, both for the business and for my own presence in this sphere." Her voice carried authority tempered with calm, a balance she had cultivated over years of observing, calculating, and surviving in spaces that had once minimized her contributions. Victor nodded. "Agreed. And I want you to know that I will support your perspective at every stage. Your voice matters, and it should be recognized not only privately, but publicly when appropriate." There was a subtle intensity in his tone that made Clara acutely aware of the potential this partnership held not just professionally, but emotionally, in terms of validation and acknowledgement. They spent the next hour mapping out strategies, identifying key stakeholders, and rehearsing the framing of discussions to highlight Clara's expertise. Each scenario was tested with precision, anticipating reactions, potential objections, and the optimal way to convey authority without aggression. Clara felt a renewed sense of energy, a clarity she hadn't experienced in years. This was not about revenge against Brian. It was about reclaiming what had always belonged to her, the recognition of her intellect, her judgment, and her agency. As the meeting concluded, Victor offered a final nod of respect. "I trust your judgment completely, Clara. The way you approach challenges is unparalleled. We will proceed with this, and I am confident the results will reflect your insight." Clara felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense of forward momentum that bolstered her resolve. Walking back through the streets of Charleston, the glow of early evening lights reflecting on the water, Clara allowed herself a moment to reflect. The Christmas gala was approaching, yes, but so was the wider stage. Every choice she made, every decision she influenced, was a step toward reclaiming her identity and presence. Brian's indifference and Sloane's ignorance no longer dictated her life. She had allies' insight and the quiet confidence that came from understanding her own worth. Arriving home, Clara took a deep breath and opened her journal, the leather-bound pages familiar and comforting. She began to write not just notes or plans, but reflections, her thoughts, her strategies, her emotions. Each word was deliberate, a reclaiming of narrative, a subtle layering of strength and intention. She wrote about the gala, about Victor's recognition, about the clarity she had gained. And for the first time in years, she allowed herself a small, private smile. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, it was hers to navigate. The night settled softly over Charleston, the quiet hum of the city, a backdrop to Clara's focused mind. Every detail she had observed, every insight she had cultivated, was a tool, a step toward the future she had been denied for too long. And as she closed her journal and looked out at the harbor lights, she whispered to herself, "I am ready." The gala, the interactions, and the eventual confrontation would all follow. But tonight she had claimed her clarity, her purpose, and the undeniable awareness that she was no longer invisible. She had begun her return deliberate and controlled, and every choice she made would echo with precision, shaping not only her immediate world, but the future she intended to command. The late afternoon sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Clara Whitmore's townhouse, casting long, warm shadows across the hardwood floors. The harbor outside shimmered in a golden haze reflecting the calm before the evening storm she was about to orchestrate. Clara sat at her desk reviewing her notes for the gala, the careful annotations she had been refining for days. Each bullet point, every highlighted section, every legal detail and strategic consideration had been meticulously compiled. She had Victor's support, her own insight, and a renewed sense of authority, but she knew this was only the beginning. The real test would come when presence met perception. Her phone buzzed. A text from Maureen. We meet at the boutique in 30 minutes. Have your game face ready." Clara allowed herself a faint smile. Maureen's energy always helped sharpen her focus. It wasn't just friendship. It was a partnership in reclaiming a life that had been quietly siphoned away by years of invisibility. The thought brought a flicker of warmth, a reminder that she was not alone in this process. By the time Clara arrived at the boutique, the afternoon had shifted into a gentle twilight, the sky painted in soft shades of lavender and amber. Maureen was already bustling, adjusting lighting, draping fabrics across mannequins, her eyes alight with a combination of excitement and determination. "There you are," she said, motioning Clara over. "Today we work on presence posture and narrative. You've got the intellect, Clara, but tonight the room needs to feel your authority before you even speak." Clara nodded, feeling the thrill of anticipation. She followed Maureen to a full-length mirror, where her reflection showed a poised figure, elegant, refined, and purposeful. She had chosen the red gown, and every detail was perfect. The subtle shimmer, the fit that accentuated her presence, without drawing unnecessary attention, and the diamond accessories that caught the light just enough to convey understated sophistication. But Maureen had a final layer in mind, the art of entrance and engagement. Every movement, Maureen began her tone precise. Every glance, every word you utter in this room will matter. You're not just attending the gala, you are reshaping the narrative. She gestured to Clara's reflection. "See her. That is the woman they will remember. The woman they can't ignore." Clara studied herself closely, letting the words sink in. She had been invisible for too long, quietly shaping the foundations of Brian's world while remaining unseen. But now visibility was her weapon, and control her companion. She allowed herself a deep breath, imagining the room, the subtle turns of conversation, the faint rustle of fabrics and murmurs of admiration that she could command, without speaking a single word. They practiced together. Maureen coached her through subtle gestures, ways to make eye contact that conveyed both warmth and authority, the delicate balancing act of confidence without arrogance. "The room responds to subtlety," Maureen reminded her. "Don't rush it. Let them notice. Let them recognize that what they've been missing has been here all along." As they rehearsed, Clara's mind wandered briefly to Victor. His presence had been a revelation not of romance, but of acknowledgement and understanding. He saw her competence, valued her insight, and had subtly encouraged her to reclaim her space. There was a delicate tension there, a kindling of intrigue that reminded her the world beyond Brian, and Sloane could be both validating and stimulating. Yet she pushed the thought aside. This was strategy, not sentiment. Tonight was about perception, influence, and preparation. Maureen stepped back, letting Clara observe herself in the mirror. "Perfect," she said finally. "Now let's talk narrative. You need to control the story before they even speak. People are curious, they'll try to define you. Give them clarity. Define yourself." She handed Clara a notebook with points carefully outlined, key allies to acknowledge subtle interactions to display confidence, and moments to position herself strategically. Each entry was deliberate, a choreography of presence and intellect. Clara read through the points, internalizing each one. The room, once a boutique of fabric and light, had become a theater of strategy. Each reflection, each gesture, each note was a rehearsal of the persona she had cultivated over the past weeks, a woman of substance, capable and unapologetically herself. As the sun dipped lower, casting longer shadows and painting the walls in amber, the subtle hum of Charleston's evening energy drifted through the open windows. Clara felt the anticipation coiling in her chest, a mixture of excitement, calculation, and determination. This was her arena. Every detail mattered, and she had prepared meticulously. A gentle knock at the boutique door interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see Victor standing there carrying the portfolio from their previous meeting. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said softly. "I wanted to walk through the final revisions with you before the gala. It's important that everything aligns seamlessly." Clara smiled, gesturing him inside. "Victor, you're always welcome. Let's go through it." They seated themselves at a small table near the display windows, the light catching the edges of their documents. Clara presented her notes, walking through strategic suggestions and potential adjustments with precise clarity. Victor listened intently, nodding occasionally, offering subtle insights that complemented her own observations. The conversation flowed effortlessly, a seamless collaboration where intellect and intuition met. "You've considered every angle," Victor said, finally his voice carrying a quiet admiration. "It's impressive. You're not just preparing for an event, you're crafting an impact. And you're doing it with elegance, precision, and foresight." Clara allowed herself a faint smile, feeling the acknowledgement resonate in her chest. This was validation, yes, but it was also strategy in motion. Every word, every movement, every choice was designed to position her deliberately within the room, to command attention without arrogance, and to assert presence with subtle authority. They spent the next hour refining the notes, adjusting minor details, and rehearsing interactions. Victor's calm encouragement, his precise input, and his evident respect created an atmosphere of mutual focus and clarity. Clara felt a surge of confidence, a certainty that she could navigate the gala with strategic poise, command the room's attention, and demonstrate her capabilities, without need for confrontation or spectacle. As Victor departed, he left her with a simple nod and a phrase that lingered in the air. "You'll own the room, Clara. I have no doubt." She watched him leave, absorbing the weight of his words. It was not arrogance, nor was it entitlement. It was recognition, and it was powerful. Alone again, Clara allowed herself a moment to reflect. The gala was approaching, and every element had been carefully orchestrated: attire, presence, allies, strategy. The next days would test not only her preparation, but her ability to execute, to navigate attention and influence without haste or error. Every interaction, every glance, every carefully timed word would carry significance. Clara stepped to the window, watching the water shimmer under Charleston's fading light. The city seemed to hold its breath with her, anticipating her return. She felt a quiet thrill, a deliberate tension building, knowing that the culmination of preparation, insight, and presence was near. Tonight, she had honed her strategy. Tomorrow, she would begin to implement it. The room, the city, and her husband's carefully constructed world would soon realize that the woman they had hidden, underestimated, and overlooked had returned not to seek revenge, but to reclaim recognition, authority, and a voice that had long been silenced. With one final glance at the harbor lights reflecting in the water, Clara exhaled deeply. Her reflection in the window revealed a woman poised, calculated, and ready. The path ahead was clear, and for the first time in years, she felt the full force of her own presence. This was the beginning of her calculated re-entry into a world that had long kept her invisible, and she would step into it with the quiet power of certainty, elegance, and deliberate impact. The late morning sun slanted through the tall windows of Clara Whitmore's townhouse, painting her study in golden warmth. She stood at the desk, reviewing the documents Victor had provided her mind, a careful mix of calculation and anticipation. Each page represented a subtle leverage point, an opportunity to demonstrate her expertise, influence perception, and reassert her presence in a world that had long relegated her to the background. The upcoming Christmas gala wasn't merely a social event. It was a stage, a place where her carefully honed strategy would meet public scrutiny. And she was ready. Maureen entered quietly, carrying a small tray with coffee and a stack of notes. Her eyes sparkled with the kind of excitement reserved for conspiracies and schemes, the ones that promise transformation rather than mischief. "Good morning," she said softly. "Ready to finalize your approach for tonight?" She set the tray down and poured a steaming cup of coffee for Clara. "We need to anticipate the room, anticipate reactions. This isn't just about what they see. It's about what they feel when you enter." Clara accepted the cup, feeling its warmth seep into her hands, and nodded. "I've reviewed everything again," she said, her tone calm, deliberate. "Victor's suggestions are sound. The revisions strengthen the plan, but it's more than the papers. It's about presence perception timing. Every move, every glance, every word." Her voice carried a quiet authority, the kind that demanded attention even without raising itself in volume. Maureen smiled knowingly, her confidence in Clara unwavering. The doorbell rang, and Clara's pulse quickened. She hadn't expected anyone else this morning. When she opened the door, she found Victor standing there carrying the neatly organized portfolio, his expression both professional and quietly expectant. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said, stepping inside. "I wanted to walk through the final elements before the gala. I think it's important to align on every detail." Clara gestured for him to sit. "Not at all," she said. "Your timing is perfect. Let's go over everything." They seated themselves at the table by the window, the light catching the edges of the documents illuminating their careful notes. Victor spread the papers in front of Clara, sliding them toward her with a practiced, precise motion. "I've revised projections and stakeholder notes," he said. "I want to hear your perspective on these adjustments. Your insight could refine the approach, ensure nothing is overlooked, and help the room feel your presence before you even speak." Clara leaned in, tracing the margins of the documents. "Influence is subtle," she said. "It's about understanding the room, gauging the subtle dynamics, reading reactions, and steering perceptions without overt manipulation. The goal isn't to dominate, it's to guide, to be recognized for competence, clarity, and presence." Her tone was steady, intentional. Each word seemed to carry weight, an unspoken message that she was no longer invisible. Victor's eyes reflected admiration, acknowledgement, and something gentler, a spark of intrigue that Clara carefully noted but did not dwell upon. Victor nodded, sliding the next set of papers closer. "Exactly. And that's why I'm suggesting a slightly more public role for you tonight. Subtle, deliberate, commanding attention through intellect and presence, rather than force or display. Your ability to read the room and influence outcomes is exactly what this gathering needs." Clara's pulse quickened, but she kept her composure. "I understand," she said. "We must balance presence with authenticity. Every interaction should reinforce credibility, competence, and clarity. Nothing forced, nothing superficial. The room will respond to what is genuine and undeniable." She paused, letting the thought sink in. "And in doing so, we also redefine what they've assumed about me." Victor leaned forward slightly, his gaze steady. "You're not just preparing for the gala. You're crafting a narrative that cannot be ignored, that forces recognition without confrontation. And that's rare. That's powerful." His words carried validation, a subtle acknowledgement of the years Clara had spent, silently shaping outcomes unnoticed and unappreciated. Clara exhaled slowly, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. "I've spent years in the background," she admitted quietly, her voice softer. "Supporting, guiding, building. Tonight I intend to step into the light, not for revenge, not to shame, but to reclaim recognition for what has always been mine. And to ensure the room understands that presence isn't granted by proximity or title, it's earned." Victor smiled, a subtle curve of lips that was professional yet personal. "And tonight that presence will be unmistakable. You've prepared meticulously. You know every nuance. You understand every layer of influence. And most importantly, you will move with confidence. Not aggression, not performance, but with the quiet authority of someone who has always known her own worth. Clara allowed herself a small smile. She felt a thrill not of romance, but of acknowledgement. Victor's respect was not conditional, it was not performative. It was genuine recognition of capability and insight. That was more valuable than any social applause or fleeting attention. They reviewed the final notes together, considering every potential interaction, who would likely approach, who might comment on her absence from previous events, and how subtle gestures could redirect attention and establish authority. Every detail was discussed, rehearsed, and committed to memory. Clara felt the satisfaction of preparation, the kind of readiness that transformed nervous anticipation into strategic confidence. After Victor left, Clara lingered by the window, watching the harbor shimmer in the fading light. Charleston's skyline glowed softly in the early evening, a mix of elegance, tradition, and quiet movement. She sipped her coffee and let her mind trace the upcoming evening, mentally positioning herself in the space, anticipating glances, responses, and the subtle shifts of conversation. Each moment was an opportunity to assert presence, to demonstrate competence, to embody authority. Maureen's voice calling from the hallway pulled her back from reflection. Clara, the final touch is tonight. Are you ready to claim the room? Clara met her friend's eyes, steady and unwavering. I am. She said the words carrying the weight of intention, strategy, and self-recognition. Tonight they will see me not who they wanted me to be, not who they assumed I was, but who I truly am. Maureen smiled, the satisfaction of shared purpose lighting her features. Then let's make sure every moment counts, every gesture, every word, every glance. They will remember you. Clara felt a thrill run through her, a mix of anticipation, clarity, and resolve. This was more than a gala. It was a carefully orchestrated declaration, the first step in reclaiming not just recognition, but control over her life and narrative. As night approached, Clara prepared quietly, reviewing her notes, arranging her thoughts, and centering herself. Each gesture, each word, each pause she planned for the gala was deliberate. She was ready, composed, and fully aware of the power she carried, subtle, precise, and undeniable. Tonight she would step forward, and the room would witness a presence that had long been hidden, underestimated, and overlooked. And in that presence lay both strategy and revelation, setting the stage for events that would ripple far beyond the gala itself. The soft afternoon light spilled over Charleston's historic streets, and Clara Whitmore walked with a quiet confidence she had not felt in years. The harbor reflected the sky's subtle hues, casting ripples of light that mirrored the calm intensity she carried inside. The gala was approaching, and with each step toward the city center, her mind rehearsed the delicate choreography of presence, influence, and perception she had meticulously prepared. Tonight was more than an event. It was a stage, and every glance, every gesture, every word she planned would resonate with the weight of someone who had been overlooked far too long. Clara arrived at the lobby of a boutique hotel, hosting an informal pre-gala gathering, a space she and Victor had chosen to fine-tune strategies and meet key contacts. Victor greeted her at the entrance, his calm demeanor steadying the subtle tremor of anticipation that had begun to coil within her chest. Clara, he said warmly, I wanted to review a few final details before we move on to the gala itself. We have the opportunity to shape perceptions from the very beginning. She nodded, adjusting the folds of her red gown and smoothing the subtle shimmer of her accessories. I'm ready, she said, voice firm yet soft, carrying the quiet authority she had cultivated. Every movement had been practiced, every intention clear. She had prepared not only to be seen, but to be understood. Victor guided her to a secluded table overlooking the terrace. Here, he said, spreading several documents across the polished surface. These notes cover potential interactions, introductions, and the subtle dynamics in play tonight. The goal is influence without spectacle presence, without force. He met her gaze, a faint spark of admiration in his eyes. You understand these nuances better than anyone. Clara reviewed the notes, carefully tracing the margins with her fingertips, her mind piecing together sequences of interactions and responses. Timing and subtlety, she murmured. Every exchange must reinforce the perception of capability and composure. I want them to sense the authority without me having to assert it. Victor nodded, leaning slightly closer. Exactly. And if I may, he said softly, the subtlety is precisely what will make your presence unforgettable. Not arrogance, not confrontation, just the undeniable resonance of confidence and insight. They won't be able to ignore it. Clara allowed herself a brief smile. I've spent years shaping outcomes quietly. Tonight, the room will understand that invisibility doesn't equal insignificance. She paused, her gaze drifting to the harbor, visible through the terrace windows, the reflection of the sun dancing across the water like a prelude to what was to come. And they will see that recognition is not demanded, it is earned. As they continued reviewing the plan, Victor's presence became a steadying force, not merely as a collaborator, but as someone who understood the complexity of her position. He spoke with precision, highlighting subtle cues, potential reactions, and strategic opportunities for interaction. Clara absorbed every word, appreciating his quiet attentiveness, the way he valued insight over image, substance over showmanship. It was a rare validation, and yet it was strategic as well. Victor was not there to flatter, but to ensure success. A soft chime from her phone interrupted the session. Clara glanced down and saw a message from Maureen. I've arranged a few final touches. Call me before the gala for the last rehearsal. Things are falling into place. She felt a surge of quiet satisfaction. Every ally, every carefully considered detail was aligning. This was not luck, it was preparation strategy and deliberate execution. Victor looked up, reading the slight tension in her expression. Shall we take a moment to run through one more scenario, he suggested. The one where attention is divided and reactions are unpredictable. He gestured to the documents, highlighting subtle social interactions and potential conversational pitfalls. The key is presence, he continued. Calm, deliberate, and undeniable. That is your advantage. Clara's gaze met his steady and unwavering. I understand, she said. It's about control without overt dominance, about shaping perception without dictating it. Timing, observation, and poise will be my tools. Victor nodded approvingly. And those tools will create influence that is felt immediately. They will notice, they will acknowledge, and they will respect it. You will be the focal point without having to claim it explicitly. As the afternoon waned into early evening, Clara allowed herself a moment to reflect on the journey that had led her here. Years of quiet effort, of being sidelined, of watching others assume the credit and visibility she had quietly earned each moment, had prepared her for this exact point. And now, standing at the threshold of the gala, she felt a steady pulse of anticipation, the thrill of agency finally realized. Victor rose, gathering his documents with precision. I believe we're aligned, he said. You know exactly what to do. I trust you to handle this with the elegance and insight that defines you. The room will respond, and they will remember you. Clara allowed a faint, private smile. Thank you, she said softly. Not for the advice, but for seeing the value in what I already bring to the table. There was a subtle intimacy in that acknowledgement, an unspoken understanding that went beyond professional collaboration, but she held it carefully, letting it remain a quiet current beneath the surface. As Victor departed, Clara lingered for a moment by the terrace, the wind carrying the faint scent of the harbor and the city's evening life. She felt the weight of anticipation coil into purpose, a deliberate readiness that encompassed strategy, composure, and subtle power. Tonight the gala would not merely be attended, it would be navigated, orchestrated, and transformed into a space where her presence commanded recognition, naturally, effortlessly, and undeniably. A soft knock drew her attention, and Maureen appeared, her expression a mix of delight and serious focus. "It's time," she said, setting down a small bag containing final accessories. "We've rehearsed every detail. Now it's about execution. Remember, Clara, this is about presence, about subtle command. Every glance, every gesture, every word counts." Clara nodded, feeling the quiet thrill of imminent action. "I am ready," she said firmly. "Tonight they will see me not the woman they thought they knew, not the invisible partner, but exactly who I am." Maureen smiled, satisfaction and pride in her eyes. "Then let's ensure that presence is unforgettable." As the evening deepened, Charleston's lights reflected off the water with gentle brilliance, mirroring the careful glow of confidence and purpose that Clara carried within her. The gala awaited, and with it the culmination of meticulous preparation, quiet strategy, and deliberate presence. Clara Whitmore was no longer hidden. Tonight she would be seen, and that seeing would change everything. Clara Whitmore stood in front of the full-length mirror in her townhouse, the red gown carefully laid out before her like a promise. Its deep, rich silk shimmered under the soft daylight, subtle yet commanding attention, an armor of elegance and quiet power. She lifted it from the hanger, running her fingers along the smooth fabric, imagining the moment she would step into the gala, and the room would shift subtly with her presence. Every curve of the gown had been tailored to her every stitch, a silent assertion that she was ready to reclaim the space that had been denied to her for too long. Maureen appeared beside her, carrying a small bag of accessories, with an excited glint in her eyes. "Ready to complete the look?" she asked, setting the pieces on the vanity. "These aren't just finishing touches, they're statements. They speak before you even say a word." Clara nodded, her hands poised above the delicate diamonds, the thin gold bracelet that would catch the light with every subtle movement. She fastened the earrings, the bracelet sliding with a soft click around her wrist. She gazed into the mirror, taking in the transformation the woman she had been, and the woman she had become merged seamlessly in confidence, grace, and intention. "They won't know what hit them," Maureen said softly, adjusting Clara's shoulders. "But remember, this isn't about spectacle. It's about command. Every gesture, every glance, every word must reflect who you are inside and out." Clara exhaled slowly, letting her gaze linger on the reflection. Her mind drifted to Victor, whose presence in her recent life had been more than professional. It had been an acknowledgement, a mirror reflecting the potential she had long suppressed. She recalled the subtle respect in his eyes, the way he valued her insight, and she felt a quiet surge of anticipation. But this was not the time for distraction. The gala demanded focus, strategy, and precision. Maureen stepped back, studying Clara's stance. "Good," she said. "Now let's walk through the entrance. Imagine the room, every corner, every table, every interaction. How do you move? How do you position yourself? Who do you acknowledge first?" Timing is everything. Clara followed her friend's lead, practicing the subtle shifts of posture, the controlled pacing of steps, and the deliberate way to meet each gaze. Maureen coached her through eye contact that conveyed warmth tempered with authority, the delicate balance of approachability and command. Clara absorbed every nuance, letting it seep into her movements, feeling the energy of the room before even stepping into it. Her phone buzzed, pulling her attention. A message from Victor. "All set for tonight." Remember, you are the focus of the room whether anyone expects it or not. Confidence and clarity will carry you." She smiled faintly, a small acknowledgement of the quiet reassurance he had consistently provided. It was not just support, it was validation, a recognition of competence and poise she had long been denied. As twilight settled over Charleston, the city lights casting warm reflections across the harbor, Clara felt the subtle coil of anticipation tightening. She and Maureen left the townhouse, the quiet hum of the city accompanying them as they approached a discreet pre-gala gathering. The boutique hotel lobby was understated, yet elegant, a place where strategy and social navigation could be rehearsed one final time. Clara's heart beat with measured excitement, the anticipation a delicate tension that sharpened her awareness. Victor was already present, reviewing documents with a calm focus. He looked up as they arrived, a slight smile on his lips. "Clara," he greeted, "I'm glad you're here. I wanted to walk through the final sequence just to ensure that every interaction tonight aligns seamlessly with the plan." He gestured toward the documents neatly organized on the table. "This is about influence, presence, and subtle command. You understand the room more than anyone else?" Clara nodded, taking her place at the table. "Every detail matters," she said, voice steady, measured. "This is about shaping perception without overt assertion, commanding attention without force, and ensuring that every gesture and word carries purpose." She paused, letting the weight of her statement sink in. "Tonight they will see exactly who I am." Victor studied her for a moment, the quiet admiration in his eyes not crossing into familiarity, but carrying an unmistakable recognition of her capability. "And that will make all the difference," he said. "Not just the room, not just tonight, but for your entire presence going forward. You're reclaiming what has always been yours, visibility, recognition, influence," Maureen added softly. "You've done the work, Clara. You've prepared, you've strategized, you've anticipated. Now it's about execution. Trust yourself and trust the presence you've built." Clara took a deep breath, centering herself. "I trust it," she said, "and I trust myself." She glanced toward the harbor through the lobby's windows, the golden reflection, a quiet affirmation that the city, the evening, and the room awaiting her were all canvases for her deliberate impact. Victor leaned in, lowering his voice. "Remember, subtlety is key. Every eye will notice, every whisper will react, but it's the quiet control, the deliberate calm that will command attention. You don't need to dominate, you need to influence." Clara allowed herself a small, private smile. "I understand," she said. "Tonight is not about confrontation or proving a point. It's about presence, clarity, and recognition. Everything else will follow naturally." They spent the next hour reviewing scenarios, anticipating reactions, and rehearsing subtle interactions. Clara visualized each conversation, each glance, and each acknowledgement, mentally placing herself in the room, navigating attention and perception with precision. The tension coiled into purpose, the anticipation into strategy, and with each passing moment, her confidence solidified. As the pre-gala session ended, Victor offered a final nod of reassurance. "You're ready," he said. "Every detail, every gesture, every word is aligned. The room will respond, and they will remember you not as someone who arrived unexpectedly, but as someone who owns the space effortlessly." Clara gathered her notes and looked at Maureen, whose expression radiated pride and quiet excitement. "Let's go," she said, her voice carrying a subtle authority, calm yet commanding. "It's time." Walking through the streets of Charleston toward the gala venue, the city's lights shimmering against the winter twilight, Clara felt the careful tension of anticipation and purpose. She was not the woman hidden in the shadows, overlooked for years, or dismissed in favor of a younger presence. She was Clara Whitmore, deliberate, prepared, and poised, Every interaction, every glance, every movement tonight would serve as a declaration of her competence, her clarity, and her undeniable presence. Standing at the grand entrance, she paused, inhaling the cool evening air, letting the weight of preparation settle fully. Tonight she would move with calculated grace, with subtle power, and with the quiet authority that only comes from knowing one's worth. The room awaited the players were present, and Clara Whitmore was ready to step forward, not as a background figure, not as an overlooked partner, but as the woman who had quietly built, strategized, and prepared to command recognition. The evening air had a chill that nipped gently at Clara Whitmore's cheeks as she stood on the balcony of her townhouse, gazing over Charleston's illuminated streets. The lights reflected off the harbor, a quiet, shimmering mirror to the tension building inside her. The gala was only hours away, and the city seemed to hum with expectation, a silent witness to the performance she had so carefully orchestrated. Every detail, her gown, her posture, her calculated presence had been honed over days, rehearsed and refined. Yet beneath the poised exterior, a quiet storm of anticipation churned. The room would not merely be occupied, it would respond subtly, powerfully, and unmistakably to her presence. Inside, Maureen was adjusting the final touches on Clara's ensemble, her fingers precise, her voice calm, but laced with excitement. "Red," she said, lifting the gown against Clara's reflection in the mirror, "is the color of power, of confidence, of being seen. Tonight it isn't about blending in, it's about being unforgettable." She set the matching earrings on the vanity, their sparkle catching the low light. Every detail matters. Not for him, not for Sloane, not for the room you. It's for you to be fully present in your own life. Clara touched the silk fabric, feeling the weight of its significance. It wasn't vanity. It wasn't spectacle. It was armor, a statement of reclamation. For years, she had been hidden, overlooked, assumed invisible in the spaces that had shaped her husband's career, and by extension, their social circle. Tonight would be different. Every gesture, every glance, every interaction would signal authority, intelligence, and quiet dominance. She was no longer the background figure. She was the focal point. A soft chime on her phone drew her attention. It was Victor. "Final check-in before the gala. Confidence and clarity will carry you. I trust you." Clara allowed herself a faint smile. His acknowledgement was not the spark of romance. It was validation. Recognition for what she had always contributed, for what she had been denied. That respect stoked a quiet fire within her, a precise, controlled fire that fueled anticipation rather than distraction. The journey to the gala was filled with a tense silence, punctuated by occasional guidance from Maureen. "Remember," her friend whispered, "every step, every glance, every interaction sets the stage. The room will respond before you even speak." Clara nodded, absorbing the subtle cues, the invisible choreography of presence power and poise. The anticipation wrapped around her like a cloak, steady and grounding. The Savoy Hotel's doors opened before them, revealing a ballroom bathed in soft amber light. The atmosphere was elegant, subdued, yet charged with potential energy, a space where every glance, every whisper, every subtle movement carried meaning. Guests mingled, unaware that a quiet transformation was about to shift the room's dynamic entirely. Clara inhaled, centering herself. She was not stepping in as the wife who had been overlooked. She was stepping in as a force that demanded recognition, yet offered grace. Brian's laughter floated across the room, mingled with Sloane's lighter, higher-pitched tones. Clara's lips curved in a controlled, private smile. They believed the room belonged to them, that her absence had gone unnoticed. They did not understand that influence does not require permission, it must be earned. Tonight, she would earn it in subtle yet undeniable increments. Clara moved into the room. Each step measured, each gesture deliberate. The red gown caught the light in a quiet shimmer, the diamond earrings and thin bracelet reflecting glints that were not ostentatious, but commanding in their elegance. Heads turned. Whispers barely audible rippled through the crowd. Curiosity, interest, recognition. Clara held her posture, her expression serene, her eyes alert. Every detail was intentional. She scanned the room, noting familiar faces, potential allies, and individuals whose reactions could shift the social landscape. Victor stepped slightly ahead, introducing her strategically guiding interactions that allowed Clara to demonstrate competence and presence simultaneously. Conversations flowed, punctuated with moments that highlighted her intelligence, insight, and composure. She was deliberate, navigating with precision. Every subtle nod, every thoughtful pause, every slight smile conveyed authority without arrogance. Across the room, Brian noticed her. For a brief suspended moment, his confident demeanor faltered. He turned to Sloane, searching for reassurance, but found only the uncertainty mirrored in her expression. Clara's private satisfaction was tempered. This was not humiliation. It was clarity. Recognition. The room, the colleagues, the clients, and the observers were witnesses to her presence, her poise, and her authority. A few minutes later, she approached a cluster of industry peers, guiding the conversation subtly toward topics she knew intimately: strategic investments, community initiatives, and legal insights that shaped projects she had long influenced. The group listened attentively, nodding at her points, responding to her insights. She did not need to dominate. She only needed to be undeniable. Every word, every glance, every gesture reinforced her visibility. She had been underestimated, yes, but underestimated no longer. Victor caught her eye, offering a subtle nod. In it was recognition, respect, and shared strategy. They had aligned their efforts seamlessly. Clara allowed herself a faint, quiet smile. The interplay of presence and intellect was unfolding exactly as she had envisioned. She navigated toward a quieter corner where a small group had gathered to discuss community development projects. She contributed insights with precision, her knowledge evident, her demeanor composed. Observers took note. A young journalist taking subtle notes seemed to glance repeatedly in her direction, curiosity piqued. Clara's awareness of every subtle shift in attention, every movement of energy allowed her to maintain the balance between engagement and presence. Brian attempted to approach his posture, hesitant, his usual assuredness muted. Clara met his gaze calmly, deliberately, with a composed nod. "Brian," she said, voice soft but steady, "I see the evening is lively." There was no accusation, no bitterness, only measured acknowledgement. His response faltered. He had expected a passive figure, someone unseen, someone easily controlled. Instead, he faced a presence fully aware of her worth. Sloane hovered nearby, uncertainty creeping into her usual confidence. She had counted on Clara's absence, on the invisibility that had been maintained for years. The realization that Clara was now fully present, commanding subtle attention and influence, unsettled her. There was no need for confrontation. Clara's authority was quiet, precise, and undeniable. Clara allowed herself a brief pause by the balcony, gazing at the harbor beyond the city lights, reflecting off the water like faint glimmers of potential and promise. She felt the careful coil of anticipation release, slightly replaced by a focused determination. Tonight had demonstrated not only her preparation, but also her capacity to command recognition without spectacle influence, without assertion, and respect without confrontation. A final glance toward Victor confirmed alignment. He smiled subtly, an acknowledgement that reinforced her strategy and her position. Every interaction, Every glance, every subtle assertion of presence had reinforced the quiet but undeniable truth: Clara Whitmore was no longer invisible. She was seen, acknowledged, and respected. And this evening the shift had begun, setting the stage for the deeper transformations yet to come. The Christmas gala hall glimmered under soft amber lights, the chandeliers casting a delicate glow over the assembled crowd. Clara Whitmore stepped through the entrance, every movement deliberate, every gesture poised. Conversations faltered as she passed, heads turned, eyes following the elegant sweep of her red gown. She didn't need to speak. The quiet power of presence did its work before words were necessary. Victor, stationed near the main reception, gave her a subtle nod, a silent signal of encouragement. Clara moved with calculated grace, acknowledging allies with composed smiles, guiding her interactions carefully. Then across the room she saw him. Brian. His confident facade faltered as his gaze met hers. The man who had once dictated her invisibility now confronted a presence he could no longer ignore. Beside him, Sloane's expression shifted from smug certainty to a subtle unease, the disparity between expectation and reality now starkly visible. Clara allowed herself a small, controlled smile. Not of triumph, but of clarity. She walked closer to a group of industry peers, sharing insights and offering precise commentary, demonstrating authority and intellect in a way that required no arrogance, no drama. The room subtly realigned. Conversations paused, glances shifted, the energy bending toward her quiet command. Brian tried to interject, attempting casual conversation, but Clara responded with measured composure, steering dialogue with elegance, reinforcing her visibility and influence. Sloane hovered awkwardly, realizing that Clara's presence was not only undeniable, but influential, commanding attention, without need for force. Later, near the center of the ballroom, Clara paused by the display of charity initiatives, Victor at her side. A reporter quietly observed from a distance, noting her composed, authoritative engagement with guests. Each question she answered, each introduction she facilitated, further solidified her presence. Observers whispered not in scandal, but in recognition. This woman, once hidden, now commanded attention through intellect, poise, and presence alone. Clara's eyes met Victor's, a brief shared acknowledgement of strategic alignment, respect, and mutual understanding. No words were necessary. Tonight, the shift was complete. The room had seen her. Brian's carefully constructed world no longer defined her. She had reclaimed her narrative with deliberate, undeniable force. And in that quiet dominance, the emotional weight of years spent unseen began to lift, leaving clarity, purpose, and an emerging sense of fulfillment. The gala had begun to settle into its rhythm, conversations drifting through the room like soft music. Clara Whitmore moved through the crowd with deliberate ease, her presence commanding subtle attention without a word. She lingered near the displays of charitable initiatives, observing reactions with the calm focus of someone who had long studied the art of influence. Guests approached her naturally drawn, not by spectacle, but by the quiet authority she exuded. Each interaction reinforced her narrative, her visibility, her claim to recognition long denied. Victor Reyes appeared beside her, his subtle smile acknowledging the precision of her engagement. "You've transformed the room," he said softly. "Every eye turns when you enter. Every conversation bends toward your presence." Clara allowed a brief, controlled smile. "It's not about spectacle," she replied. "It's about clarity, influence without aggression, recognition without confrontation." She gestured toward a group discussing local development projects. "Observe. They respond to competence, calm, and intent more than any loud declaration could command." A soft murmur spread through the room. Whispers of admiration, curiosity, and subtle intrigue wove into the gala's rhythm. Clara noticed Brian attempting to regain composure, positioning himself near a cluster of colleagues, while Sloane hovered uncertainly, her previous confidence wavering under the undeniable shift in presence. Clara's lips curved faintly, not triumph, not vindication, but the quiet satisfaction of clarity. Her role, her intelligence, her value were visible, now undeniable, in the subtle shifts of attention around her. Victor gestured toward a reporter standing nearby, quietly observing the interactions. "She's taking notes," he murmured. "Your insights are not just being noticed, they're being documented." Clara nodded, sensing the ripple of influence spreading beyond immediate interactions. Her years of preparation, quiet strategy, and deliberate presence were not fleeting. They were setting a precedent, establishing recognition in ways Brian could no longer control. Later, near the center of the room, Clara engaged with a small group of industry leaders. Her voice, calm, yet authoritative, guided discussions on strategic development, community impact, and long-term planning. Every suggestion, every thoughtful pause reinforced credibility. Observers, even those unaware of her prior invisibility, noted the presence and poise that commanded attention without assertion. She did not need to dominate. She needed only to be undeniable. As the evening progressed, Clara found a quiet moment near the balcony, gazing at the harbor lights reflecting across the water. Victor joined her silently. "You've created more than presence," he said, his voice low but sincere. "You've established influence. Tonight they see not just a woman, they see authority, intellect, and poise in motion, recognition long overdue finally claimed." Clara exhaled slowly, a sense of fulfillment threading through her chest. The gala had not merely been attended, it had been navigated, orchestrated, and subtly transformed. Every glance, every acknowledgement, every carefully considered interaction had shifted perception. Brian's constructed world no longer dictated her visibility. She had reclaimed her narrative quietly, deliberately, and undeniably. The ripple of tonight's events would extend far beyond this evening, a testament to preparation, poise, and unwavering clarity. The gala had ended hours ago, and yet Clara Whitmore sat quietly in her townhouse, the soft glow of Charleston's evening lights streaming through the windows. The room smelled faintly of pine and candle wax, subtle reminders of the holiday season, but her mind was fully alive with the consequences of the night. Every glance, every interaction, every subtle acknowledgement had shifted perceptions. Her presence had been recognized, her authority subtly claimed. She let her fingers trace the rim of her glass of tea, savoring a moment of quiet reflection before the next steps. Her phone buzzed softly. It was Victor. The morning paper has already picked up on tonight's subtle highlights. People are talking. Recognition is spreading. Clara allowed herself a faint smile. She had not sought public attention, nor had she orchestrated spectacle. Yet her presence, undeniable and composed, had begun to ripple beyond the room. Even those who had once overlooked her could no longer ignore the influence she commanded. The following morning, she walked to a nearby cafe to meet Diane Caldwell, her former mentor. Diane, a seasoned family and business lawyer, had always been a guiding presence in Clara's life. Today, however, their meeting was about more than counsel. It was about formalizing the acknowledgement of Clara's contributions, ensuring that her visibility translated into tangible recognition and protection. Clara Diane began, her voice steady. "I've read through the documentation you provided. Your role, your influence, the intellectual and strategic contributions to Brian's business, it's all substantial. Legally, there is more than enough to assert recognition, and if necessary, equitable adjustments." She paused, observing Clara's calm but focused demeanor. "It's remarkable how you've navigated this with such composure." Clara exhaled slowly, a quiet satisfaction threading through her. I never wanted conflict, she said softly. I wanted acknowledgement, visibility, and fairness. The gala was just the beginning. Now it's about ensuring the narrative aligns with reality. Diane nodded. Exactly. And with the exposure your presence has already created, the momentum is in your favor. Public perception combined with legal clarity ensures that no one can undermine your contributions again. Clara's gaze shifted to the harbor visible through the cafe window, the water shimmering in early morning light. It's time, she murmured more to herself than anyone else. It's time to claim what has always been mine, quietly, deliberately, and without malice. Recognition, respect, and a voice that cannot be silenced. Victor arrived shortly afterward, joining the discussion seamlessly. His presence was steady, supportive, a subtle reinforcement of the path Clara was crafting. The response is already evident, he said. Colleagues, clients, and observers are discussing the gala and your influence. The room may have shifted temporarily, but now the larger perception begins to align with reality. Your voice, your insight is being recognized. Clara nodded, her hands folding around her coffee cup. This isn't about revenge, she said, her voice calm but firm. It's about acknowledgement, fairness, and the deliberate assertion of competence. Tonight's results are just the first ripple. What follows will solidify what has been unseen for far too long. Diane and Victor exchanged a glance, a quiet acknowledgement of shared strategy and mutual respect. Clara felt the weight of years of invisibility begin to lift, replaced by clarity, purpose, and deliberate momentum. She had navigated the room, subtly shifted perceptions, and now with allies and preparation, she could ensure the recognition she deserved would persist beyond a single evening. Her gaze lingered on the harbor sunlight glinting off the water, and she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The gala had proven her presence undeniable. Now, with preparation, strategy, and deliberate action, the world would fully recognize the value, intellect, and authority that Clara Whitmore had always carried quietly and now unapologetically claimed. Clara Whitmore sat in her sunlit office, the quiet hum of Charleston outside offering a peaceful backdrop to a day that had begun with clarity and purpose. The gala, Victor's support, and the subtle shifts in perception had created a momentum she was determined to carry forward. But now she felt a deeper calling, one that extended beyond personal recognition and influence. She wanted to transform the energy she had reclaimed into something meaningful, something that could touch others who, like her, had been overlooked or undervalued. Maureen entered holding a folder brimming with notes and ideas. I've been thinking, she said, her tone energized, yet grounded, about how we can channel your visibility, your voice into something lasting. Recognition is one thing, Clara, but legacy is another. Clara tilted her head, intrigued. Go on. What if, Maureen continued, we create a foundation, a platform that helps women re-enter the workforce after years away, whether for family, personal reasons, or career setbacks. Your experience, your insight, the way you reclaimed your presence. That story could inspire and guide others. And it would be authentic. It would matter. Clara leaned back, absorbing the idea. The thought stirred something warm in her chest, a purpose beyond herself. I've spent years building value behind the scenes, helping projects, people, and initiatives succeed, without ever claiming recognition, she said softly. Maybe it's time to use what I've learned to build opportunities for others, to give them the tools to be seen and acknowledged for their worth. Maureen smiled, her excitement contagious. Exactly. And with your network, your visibility from the gala, and Victor's support, it's feasible. We can structure it to provide mentorship, strategic guidance, and community engagement. The women who benefit will not only gain confidence, they'll gain influence and recognition just as you have. Clara considered the vision carefully, picturing women walking into rooms, with poise, confidence, and clarity, reclaiming spaces they had long been excluded from. She thought of her own journey, the careful preparation, the deliberate presence, the subtle command of attention, and realized she could now teach that same power to others. She stood moving to the window overlooking the harbor and inhaled the crisp December air. "Let's do it," she said finally, turning back to Maureen. "Let's build something meaningful, something lasting, something that reminds women that their worth is never invisible." Maureen nodded, a proud, satisfied smile spreading across her face. "Then we start today." Victor arrived shortly thereafter, reviewing the preliminary plans and offering guidance on strategy network leverage and logistics. "This is more than a foundation," he said, quietly, observing Clara's energy and focus. "This is influence legacy and empowerment in action. You're creating opportunities that extend beyond recognition into real impact." Clara felt a profound sense of fulfillment. She had transformed visibility into influence into purpose, and purpose into action. The gala had shown her power, but now she was using it to light the way for others. And as she gazed out at the harbor lights reflecting on the water, she felt the quiet satisfaction of someone who had not only reclaimed her narrative, but had begun shaping a future far greater than herself. The gala hall was alive with gentle murmurs, the soft glow of chandeliers reflecting off polished surfaces. But Clara Whitmore stood quietly near the balcony, looking out at Charleston's harbor, the water glimmering like liquid gold under the evening lights. Around her, the room hummed with conversations, laughter, and subtle admiration, yet her focus was calm, deliberate, and centered. She felt the culmination of months of preparation strategy and reclaiming of self, a journey that had led her to this moment of clarity and quiet triumph. Victor approached, a gentle smile on his face. "You've changed the energy of this room, Clara. It's subtle but unmistakable. Everyone sees it even if they don't fully understand it yet." Clara turned to him, her eyes reflecting gratitude and quiet pride. "It's not about being seen for vanity," she said softly. "It's about presence, purpose, and integrity, about reclaiming what was always mine and maybe inspiring others to do the same." She glanced across the room, catching Brian's expression, discomfort, acknowledgement, and the faint realization of what he had underestimated all these years. Sloane lingered awkwardly beside him, her confidence replaced by respect, tinged with unease. Clara's lips curved into a small, peaceful smile. Victor offered his arm. "Shall we step outside?" She nodded, taking his arm with composed grace. Together they walked toward the terrace, the cool evening air brushing against her cheeks. For the first time in years, Clara felt fully herself, visible, valued, and in control of her own narrative. "I didn't need revenge," she whispered to Victor, looking out at the harbor lights. "I just needed to remember who I was." And in that quiet understanding, the room, the night, and her life all shifted, leaving her with a sense of fulfillment, clarity, and enduring purpose.